So Anthony Joshua recently did an interview with Men's Health where he disclosed the fact that he's been watching At Home with the Furies on Netflix. He said, quote, "I'm partly watching it because it gives me an insight that I maybe can use if we do fight, such as how you can change his mood. They say I am mentally weak. He definitely has mental issues. In the heat of a fight, you're not going to be thinking, that bit in episode 7 of the Netflix series. But it does give the psychologists a chance to understand him more. We separate the elements of a fight. You have the fight strategy, then you have psychological warfare, and then you have things like, shall I wear red to signal danger? All these different things. So something like the TV thing won't help me in the fight, but it might help me in the lead up." All right, those are the words of Anthony Joshua. Now, there's nothing wrong with watching At Home with the Furies with a view to maybe finding out what Tyson Fury's buttons are and then pushing him in the run up to any fight you might have with him. But rule number one, and surely the most obvious thing when you're going to try and do something like that, is you don't let Tyson Fury or whoever your opponent is going to be know that that's what you're doing. Anthony Joshua has let the cat out of the bag. Rule number one in these psychological battles is you try to disguise your intent. You try to keep your opponent guessing. You try to do things that he maybe doesn't expect. If you're telling him right up front, this is my strategy and this is what I'm going to try and do, then your strategy is null and void. Your opponent is going to know what you're going to do before you do it. So to me, it's absolutely bizarre that Anthony Joshua is disclosing this information. You're supposed to keep that to yourself. Now, as for him saying that Tyson Fury has mental issues, he preceded it by saying, people say that I am mentally weak. We heard Anthony Joshua went into a dark room for 3 or 4 days or whatever to challenge himself and to become stronger. So AJ knows that he's not the strongest guy mentally. And just to clarify something here, Anthony Joshua is mentally stronger than the average person. Obviously, the average person couldn't have held it together against Klitschko at Wembley in front of 80,000. We get that. We're comparing Anthony Joshua to his rivals, to other top 10 heavyweights. And in that regard, he doesn't fare that well. There are fighters who are not as good as Anthony Joshua that are mentally stronger than him. People like Dylan White, for example. People like Derek Chisora. So AJ knows he has an issue with regards to his mindset and he's searching for answers. But he's been searching for these answers for years. We heard in the run-up to the first Ruiz fight that AJ was working with some type of military veteran and asking for their advice for what you're supposed to do when you're stunned and you're disoriented. Absolutely bizarre that a boxer would be asking someone who's not a boxer for that type of advice. You've been stunned. Even prior to the Ruiz fight, he fought Vladimir Klitschko. In the amateurs, he got stopped. He got stunned. In sparring, so on and so forth. You're supposed to have figured that stuff out for yourself, but you're seeking advice from people who don't even box? What's all that about? Anthony Joshua doesn't seem to have a very strong sense of self. To me, he's like Dumbo. You know the cartoon Dumbo, where the elephant is given the magic feather and he thinks he needs the magic feather in order to fly? And then there's that one scene where he's falling from a great height and he loses the magic feather and he thinks he's going to crash into the ground and die. But then his little companion, I can't remember, is it a mouse or something that's with him, says, you don't need that feather. You can fly by yourself. That feather was only ever a coping mechanism to help you get over your nerves. You can fly without it. And right before he hits the ground and they both perish, Dumbo realizes it and he spreads his big ears and he starts flying. Anthony Joshua reminds me of Dumbo at this point. He doesn't yet realize that all of these external coping mechanisms are not necessary. Look within. All these weird gimmicks and hiring veterans and going in dark rooms for 4 days is weird stuff for a guy as experienced as he is. At the very most, you see a sports psychologist. But other than that, the rest of it, throw it out. That's my view. You got your trainer there, a sports psychologist, that's all you need. If you even need the sports psychologist at all, but they can be useful. But all the other gimmicky stuff, to me, it's a waste of money and it's a waste of time. It eats into your boxing training. Anthony Joshua strikes me as a man who likes to overcomplicate things. They call boxing the sweet science, but it's actually more of an art than a science. It's more intuitive. It's more instinctive. A science is precise. Weights, measures, mathematical calculations, etc. And that's what Anthony Joshua seems to think it is. He's diving deep into it like it's some type of academic subject, an actual science. No, you're taking the sweet science label that boxing's been given too literally. It's more of an art form than a science. There's a scientific element to it, but it's more of an art form. Intuition is very important in boxing. And that's the side of things that you need to be developing if you're Anthony Joshua. And how you develop that is being in the ring, reading your opponent's body language, spending as much time with other fighters as possible, listening to your coach, of course, but also adding on to what your coach has told you. In fact, going into the Robert Helenius fight, Anthony Joshua was saying that Derek James told him that the things he did against Jermaine Franklin, he should make them his own going into the Robert Helenius fight. However you want to interpret that. The way I interpret it is he wanted Anthony Joshua to be a bit more creative rather than boxing by the numbers. Be a bit of an artist. But it seems as though Anthony Joshua doesn't really have much of an artistic streak, or he hasn't tapped into it yet. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments section below.